Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, boys and girls, hello. And welcome to Media Studies, another Saturday morning with Saby, Reyes, Kulkarni. I'm James Brown. What's up, Saby?
What's up, James? I'm Saby. I'm here with the hardest working man in the media business. J.B. Brown. I mean,
Uh,
J.A. Brown.
yeah, I got to get used to that one. But that's another story. Um, we're live.
Living in the media.
We're live on YouTube. We're live on X. We're live on Rumble. Hello, hello, hello. Thanks for joining us. Saby, you've got some things cooking you want to touch on first.
Yeah, I'm working on my next Substack essay titled What Comes After the Comedian as Prophet Era, which where I get into how we got to this place where comedians are sort of our leading edge public intellectuals.
Slow down a bit. I know you. Okay, comedian as prophet. Define your terms.
Well, I mean, this goes back, um, I would say, when we got to Jon Stewart as like the driving people like Jon Stewart and Colbert and Bill Maher as the driving forces, and then Trevor Noah of political discourse, like in people's homes when they were still watching those shows on cable.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got to the place shortly after that in, I don't know, the late aughts or whatever it was, where all these fucking memes with Louis CK like waxing poetic like he was some sort of like Taoist monk or something, and as if he
Everything
had
is awesome and nobody's happy.
so whatever. Like, I mean, I just noticed there was like a popular cultural trend towards investing him in particular with all this wisdom, which I thought was really insane. And before the scandal, I thought was absolute bullshit. And now, obviously Joe Rogan becoming the online powerhouse that he is, but with all these other people following and becoming sort of like the D-Day invasion of like public discourse, like the troops in the front line, your Konstantin Kisins, your Dave Smiths, your Tim Dillons, I mean, on and on and on and on and on. And then where we are now since October 7th with this rift in the anti-woke brigade and all this infighting among comedians. And I talk about Dave Smith versus Konstantin, with their stances on Israel. And it just watching this as a cultural phenomenon, like slow building over time, whereas musicians were once romanticized and, in my view, always over glorified as revolutionary voices, which I don't think musicians really truly ever were that for the most part. And now how we're in a place where musicians, I find, are playing it 1000% safe. Like most of them, not all, but so many of them are just in lockstep with the same exact rhetoric. There's nothing left there. So as comedians start to kind of eat their own and become more sort of generic in their presentation and their outlook, who's next to replace that? What is the cutting edge of challenging the prevailing social orthodoxy? Who is that going to come from? Because I think eventually the comedians are going to dry up too. That's my essay that I'm working on my Substack, feedbackdef.substack.com. And I had a pretty cool week because I wrote, actually, it was just a comment. There's a jazz piano player named Ethan Iverson. He's most well known for being in a band called the Bad Plus, which they rose to fame in the year 2003 because they were doing covers of rock tunes like, Black Sabbath's Iron Man, like really obvious, for the most part, really obvious songs. They did Tom Sawyer by Rush. They did Smells Like Teen Spirit, which is their highest fucking streaming song. And so he posted on his Substack, the new Andre 3000 is god awful. And so I just commented on that. And then I said, oh, I'm going to post this. And then he even though I agree with him, and he agrees with you even more so, even though I agree with him on the album, I rebutted his points. And I was like, okay, you're giving this guy shit for as if he's intruding on jazz and not taking it seriously. In my opinion, you guys were doing that on rock. And he was cool enough to repost it. He just said point counterpoint. So I was like, okay, that's the way to do it. And
can we slow down here?
Yeah.
I
don't drink coffee or take speed, by the way, people, or do cocaine, although I've been accused of all three.
Yeah, let's go back to your first point, because I think your first point's fascinating. If you want, we can go to Iverson after that.
Yeah. Or what we don't
Yeah, because I think it's I don't want to lose that first point, because I think it's an interesting question that's worth marinating on a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, so let me just, do you agree with me, or where do you place the origin of this? My origin of this trend as like the comedian as the prophet, in a way, as like the channel for our collective examination of the sociopolitical order. For me, like that first registered with me when Bill Maher was doing Politically Incorrect way back when. But you can go back to Carlin, you can go back to Lenny Bruce, you can go back to
Lenny Bruce. Like I think that was my first inclination when you said that. Like that like that's you've way like given Bill Maher way too much credit, or Jon Stewart. Like I think that's that kind of political rhetoric, sort of like saying the thing that no one else will say, or that a certain strata of society believes that they're saying something that no one else will say. Goes back. I mean, I think from a political perspective, with comedy, we're talking Lenny Bruce, we're talking Carlin. I mean, to a degree, prior. I mean, you can even go Cosby to a degree, but like these characters are the forefathers of that next group. Well, I wouldn't say necessarily next group, but the group that you're talking about, whether it's Maher, whether it's Stewart, and
Colbert, John Oliver, people like that,
and Rogan, you'd throw in there as well, because they're all sort of in the same sort of between 50 and 60-ish. Like they're in that cohort, which is fascinating because they all sort of had peak relevance at different times.
Mm-hmm.
Like because Rogan's probably at peak relevance now,
right?
Stewart was probably in reaction to George W. Bush and Obama. Stewart was Colbert was around the same time. You can argue more people are actually seeing Colbert now, strangely, but I think he's less relevant. But his peak moment of his Donald Trump reaction in the whole vaccine bit and such, I think so. I'll take that back. I think this is that Colbert is past his second run. Right. His first run was obviously the character on Comedy Central, reacting to Bill O'Reilly and Fox News and such, and then he had this second run of high end relevance with his with the COVID era run he had. Yeah, so I think thinking about the comedian as prophet, just zooming out a bit, and whether that's over or that we've moved on from it. I don't think we have.
Well, I'm asking what comes after. I'm not saying we're past it. I just wonder
Uh,
what's down the horizon. What, because this was a space that, in terms of mass perception, I think people just generally used to project this onto musicians and expect it from musicians. And you mentioned Pryor and Carlin. The reason I I look at ground zero for this as Bill Maher is because that's the precursor to when this became like institutionalized. Pryor and Carlin were they were taking shots at the pieties. That's the almost the purpose of comedy, you could argue, right? To undercut and peel behind the mask of what is acceptable. But then this sort of became installed, and I think politically incorrect was sort of the petri dish for that. And then all of a sudden, a generation or so later, in terms of media, you get all these people that are now looked to, certainly with Jon Stewart, as the antenna for how we understand politics.
I don't think so. I think that you are giving. We're not that macro. Stewart was an antenna for a certain type of person to understand politics.
But prior to that, was there another comedian before him that did that?
Yes, I think you could argue that Carlin was that for a certain type of
But
person,
Carlin
but
didn't.
not for
Carlin
the
didn't host a
entire. Not
show
well,
talking about it every
because you
night.
don't need to host, because at that time hosting a show, and I think this speaks to my other reaction to what you said. Because you went from hosting a show, we're talking politically correct, to
The Jon Stewart, The Daily Show. Right.
yeah, to podcasting, which is a whole other sort of. It is hosting a show, like we're technically on a show now, um, but it's the art form is a little bit different.
Well,
So I just want to complete the
yeah.
thought here. So I I I think that comedians, the expectations for a demonstration of comedians hitting their apex was different back then. It was the stand-up set. It was moving into the getting your own sitcom. I think of some of the things that Tim Allen and Jerry Seinfeld and a lot of the stars of that era, even Joe Rogan at that point, have all said this, where like the whole goal of being a comedian back then wasn't to be a comedian. It was to either become Johnny Carson, or B, become Jerry Seinfeld, or become Tim Allen, or become Roseanne. And those are the expectations and sort of drive of what a comedian does, and what the expectation of themselves and of society on them is, what I think you're getting at.
Yes, because that's precisely my point. So when Bill Maher started hosting Politically Incorrect,
Mid-90s.
right, I look at that as sort of the frontier of, like, he is a pioneer of where we are now. I'll give you an example. When Seinfeld was on TV, you wouldn't have imagined that the place we are now, where comedians are culturally on the front line of combative political discourse.
No. Yeah, I would.
What infrastructure? No.
Lenny Bruce. George
Lenny Bruce
Carlin.
is doing that. Okay, Lenny Bruce, again, I'm going to point out the difference. They were
Free
doing that from, okay, Chris Rock too. They were
Yes.
doing that from their stand-up stages. There was not an institutional, hold on a second. There was not an institutional media infrastructure. There was not an entire lane of media. I'll give you an example. I heard George Carlin say those things in the context of talking about his comedy, like he would guest on like Letterman or something and say stuff like that, or in the middle of his comedy set. I have hardly heard any stand up from Bill Maher. I've heard maybe less than 5 minutes of Joe Rogan in my life. I've never seen Dave Rubin's comedy, and I've heard very little Konstantin Kisin. And I've heard Andrew Schultz. I think he's funny as fuck. And obviously Akash, right? But these people are generating huge crowds, not on the basis of their comedy. There's no comedy on Dave Rubin's show other than when he says something funny.
I
You
think
don't have to. You don't.
I think adding Dave Rubin to this scenario.
Oh, not Dave Rubin. I'm sorry, Dave Smith. Scratch Dave Rubin.
No, Dave Smith says he's got a thriving comedy run.
There's no comedy on his show that he hosts.
But the thing is,
Jimmy Dore, same thing. Jimmy Dore is funny as fuck when he's talking about.
I get what you're saying, but I
Dave
think
Smith and Konstantin Kisin on their shows are totally sober in their discussions. In other words, they are reaching. I don't know if they're in aggregate. Comedians are reaching millions of people in aggregate. Yeah. Okay, not through simply them on stage telling jokes. We are clearly in a different phase culturally with this than we were when Lenny Bruce and George Carlin. I mean, you could put Cheech and Chong if you want to. Then you can say they're in that
for sure. I think what has changed. It speaks to one of these things that I could talk about for hours, but I'm not. But I'll give the high, the big outline. How you monetize yourself as a comedian, how the infrastructure for getting your message out there has shifted.
But it's not just the monetization; it's the message itself. D.L. Hughley,
I don't think so.
Your guy, D.L. Hughley,
my guy, of course,
is totally dreadfully unfunny and sanctimonious and serious on his show. He became actually a complete wet blanket of a hangout vibe. He's funny as fuck. Now he spends most of his time. He is interfacing with people more.
You became a talk show host
with that than with comedy. So I'm still holding to the argument. You can leave a comment and then I'll repost you restack you. But I'm still maintaining this entered a completely different phase where people are turning to comedians for something. Yes, they were doing it at the comedy show before, and they were like, "Wow, that person made me think." But other than that, it was isolated to the comedy. You didn't have a whole media platform built on George Carlin's like view of the world, where the world has owners, not rulers, or whatever his whole thing was.
Because it wasn't as easy. Because it wasn't as easy to do it as
because it wasn't existing. Because the culture didn't look to comedians. They were looking to musicians, and they were looking to intellectuals and cable. They were looking to political commentators on cable, which then fell off.
All of which exists now.
I know, but they don't have as much cultural relevance.
I don't fully disagree with you in that. I do think that there is a certain amount of that. That it's true that comedians have entered this space where they are more openly political. That people are expecting, Akash Singh to speak up on certain issues and yada, yada, yada. Okay. I don't think that is, I don't think it's, I don't think it's so much that society shifted. I think to me, it is partly the rot of our media industrial complex and how money changes hands. There was a certain point where you didn't need to talk as much as you do need to now in order to make money. And also talking, you needed more of an infrastructure than you do now. Now all you need, we have a couple webcams, we have a subscription for this service that we're on now, and we could get on and we can just yap and we can talk to the 11 people who are paying attention to us right now, right? So that they can hear us and we can talk about what we want to talk about.
Sure, to some degree, everybody.
It-
We're in the age of every person is now the thought leader. Every
yes,
can be, right?
precisely.
And comedian, you're saying comedians are nested within that.
Yes.
I'm saying since Bill Maher, since Politically Incorrect, and since the time you're talking about with Lenny Bruce, we could go a little Lenny Bruce, really, because he really like made that political battle, the free speech thing,
Yeah.
his thing. I think over that time, gradually, the expectation of the comedian as the thought leader has really, really changed. And I'm just looking ahead and wondering what comes next.
Well, I think I think before we get ahead, because I think we have to agree that that's the thought leader. I'm not sure that's what's happening.
Well, okay,
I'm not sure that I agree that with the comedian's thought leader. I'm not sure. I know that's how they're being portrayed.
And portraying
you know,
themselves.
yeah, in some cases, but I know, and you know, I don't know if you saw this New York Times report from earlier this week of how high level Democratic Party oligarchs are going to put in tens of millions of dollars to create their own Joe Rogan. Like you could just like put them in a petri dish and like grow a Joe Rogan.
Man, but if only we could get ourselves, not that I would want to work for the Democratic Party, but if only we could get gigs consulting with them on who they should turn to, that'd be a nice paycheck.
I'm sure. I mean, it's it's a
ridiculous idea. I agree with you.
This is the
like
part
a
where
Frankenstein.
Sure. Yeah, I mean that's
grow
what
them in a
they're thinking.
lab.
Yeah. And that's the way that I think a lot of the discourse has looked at comedians, where it's like, oh, here's this world where they just sort of like created themselves, and they are the tools of Trump. And I don't know if you saw the L. Reeves, Tim Dillon interview.
Well,
Did you see any of it at all?
I saw the noise around it. That was going to be one of my examples. That yes, I know comedians were on CNN and they were featured all over in interview clips, Larry King and everything like that, and Charlie Rose and everything like that. But Tim Dillon was brought on there to discuss a salient political issue. And here's where I would counter what you're saying. Music critics and art critics have been just as much on board with taking on sociopolitical issues. Why isn't there a prominent music critic that is now the voice of, hey, come to me so we can talk about these issues? That hasn't really happened that much. It's a lot of comedians have converted themselves to this sort of what I call prophet type, guru type of, even Jimmy Dore, so many of them.
Sure,
right?
sure.
So why isn't there that? And why haven't more musicians struck gold? You don't see a musician.
Because musicians don't like look. I think what's happened. I think they're it was interesting. I was just talking about this a little bit earlier today. I think that the role of musicians has changed as well. Just before we jump off of Tim Dillon, I believe it or not, I had for different projects, I downloaded that interview. I wanted to play one exchange there for you.
Please.
Of it. It's because it's in some ways I think it reflects what you said. Okay. And let me go. Huh. Can you hear me?
I sure can. Your guy JD.
By the way, I think she's an awful, awful, awful interviewer. Okay. I I guess my let me get back to us. My I think here's why it brought me where that your thought brought me to that interview, because whether it was Dave Letterman or Jay Leno or Johnny Carson before them, they would not have been asked these questions about interviewing a politician. All
or
right.
accused, like when that link you sent me, remember those links? There were a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Describing Andrew Schultz as the alt-right responsible for getting Trump elected because they had him on the show.
Just for talking to the guy.
Right. This is what did you? I want to point that out because you had sent me those links, and the way they're framing it as if these are like alt-right combat troop operatives.
And that's I think that it's, I think what we're seeing is that these comedians, because of the financial incentive, are hosting their own shows, and they're treading into water. You know, I think a flagrant, going back to the Andrew Schultz example. Remember, that was a sports show.
Or just
right?
shooting the shit.
No. It was a sports show.
Okay, I didn't know that.
The
Flagrant 2 was
yes,
shooting the
yes.
shit. Okay,
Yeah. It was Flagrant 2. It was about sports. And Andrew Schultz on the Brilliant Idiots had a lot of sports arguments, so he ended up doing a sports show with Akash, and then it evolved into Flagrant shooting the shit, and then it's gotten more and more political as it went.
Right, it was culture criticism in between there. It started to get more and more sort of just commenting on general like social observation stuff with a little more importance, like dialing up the self-importance aspect a little bit.
Yeah,
like
of course.
Seriousness. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that does reflect what you're saying, but I think it's less about comedians themselves and more about society right now.
So let me ask you this though. Why don't we see more people, audiences, if we're in this fragmented place that you've described, that I actually agree with, that there's 8 billion medias, not just, one, right?
Yeah.
Why do we not see more people, more athletes being able to do this kind of thing? Maybe you would argue that we are, but why aren't people turning to athletes? They're turning to sports commentators for it.
Yeah.
But where's the synergy there? And again, why aren't there more musicians would fucking eat this up.
All right.
Especially musicians at lower levels. They're so sanctimonious in general, and they're so itching for approval and hungry for.
Okay. It's interesting. I wish I had this clip as well, but Konstantin Kisin said this in the Tim Pool interview we did. And I've heard this from over and over and over from, on different shows online, that they can't get left-wing guests. Why won't left-wing guests go outside of the left-wing world?
That's somewhat disingenuous.
No, 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 no. I don't think it's disingenuous at all.
Konstantin Kisin said that.
Yes.
Jimmy Dore's been on that show.
No, 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 no.
They
I'm not
have
talking about Jimmy Dore. No, no, no. Jimmy Dore's outside that world. I'm talking like you could get JD Vance, but you can't get Tim Walz. You
okay. I
get
see.
Donald
I
Trump, you
see.
can't get Kamala
I see.
Harris.
I see. I see.
It's there's what's happening in terms of socially is this sort of divide. You have one side of the political spectrum that's willing to go out and just sort of like, hey, I'm going to shoot the shit and you know, speak my mind. And yeah, the other side that is really, really scared at the moment.
Okay,
And
but
there was a certain point where that wasn't so.
right. Everybody would just go everywhere, right?
But I think what's happening with comedians, I think most of them aren't necessarily right wing or left wing. There's sort of just I think there's more Dave Smiths out there. People who are kind of Dave Smithy, where they're either purple or libertarian, and they are in their financial incentive, in their perspective of the world, allow in the ability of these tools allow them to speak their mind on more stuff. Because no person who just listens to political radio or political podcasts. They listen to that in comedy. They listen to that in sports. They listen to that in history or that in whatever. You are not just one thing. There was a point in history where we lied to ourselves about public people, and we
Sure.
do that less. Public people are, if you are a comic, you're going to have political opinions as well. Yeah, it used to be that certain comics did political comedy and the rest of us didn't. No. Everybody has a political opinion to some degree. And I think what's happened is with these new platforms where you're going on every week to do a show or a couple times a week, it's like, why not talk about X and Y and Z and what's happening in the world, especially if you're a Dave Smith type character who have happened, you know, they've occurred over and over throughout history in mass media. There's always been that sort of like comedian kind of guy who is really into politics, you know, from Al Franken, you know, to
Right. I totally forgot to bring him up, which he backs you up more than me.
It's
Or he backs your point up more than mine, but yeah.
Yeah, these characters have sort of existed. I think what's happened is what you're reacting to is a society shifting in a really weird way where you have the left side of the aisle not wanting to talk to anyone who's not left, and you have these comedians who sort of are in the middle who are just sort of like, hey, I want to talk to people, and the only response you're getting from the left, which does dominate our media. I mean, I don't think there's any real solid argument against it. Is just pointing the fingers at whoever are supporting people who aren't on their team. I think that's what's happening.
So I gonna point out something I'm going to point out something that I think backs up your point, but I also disagree and agree with your point. So I think a thought exercise.
Okay.
I would ask you, how many leading voices about who are confronting politics and addressing them fall under the comedy bucket versus other lanes like other types of commentators, like, you know, traditional media political commentators, right? Like if you were to itemize them and think about the top people, how many would fall under the comedy bucket versus compared to other types?
I'm struggling with your concept there.
How many people would you have in the comedy lane who are political, who are commentating on political stuff
Are you,
versus other types of musicians, athletes, traditional media people who talk about politics? How many would do that?
okay?
How many fall under that category?
I think there's a couple things that I don't disagree that it does skew towards comedians, but here's what I'll give you a reason why. There's a really obvious reason why. They're good at talking.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to back up. So here's what I was going to say that was going to back up your point. I think
Athletes aren't good at
comedians
talking.
are
Musicians aren't good at talking. You should know that better than anybody.
well, not necessarily. I mean, yes and no. They are not necessarily.
Most musicians aren't good talkers.
They're not natural at hosting shows because they
Well,
concentrate
that's what you need in order to do that kind of stuff.
Some of them are, but some of them aren't. Some of them are gabbers. It's just because you're working in a nonverbal medium doesn't mean you're not good at talking. Music does attract more introverted people, I think, than comedy does.
Agreed. And that's why in this weird era where anyone can be a talk show host at any moment, like I think that's why you're getting them leaning into it. Also, I think you add the ideology to it.
Okay, so what I'm going to say that backs up where you're coming from is comedians are by nature observers.
Yeah.
So their job is to look out at people, take note of a bunch of stuff, and then filter it back out in a way that makes people laugh. The thing is, though, where I disagree with you is, number one, I think more people are turning to comedians as their source or their pipeline to like ingest and then digest and sort of frame sociopolitical issues. And also, Flagrant is one case where those guys are funny while they talk about these things. The overwhelming majority of the shows that I've seen, they're not being funny at all. They're just straight talking. And so
funny's weird. Because I mean, people thought Rush Limbaugh was funny.
But that's deflecting.
It's not.
Okay.
No,
Dave Smith on stage. Well, actually, I've never seen his stand up. So let me present it a different way. Konstantin Kisin in his stand up show speaks in a completely different tone. He is completely sober, other than an occasional quip here and there. He is he approaches his interviews as like a traditional interviewer would, very sober. That's not the same thing he's not doing his comedy act, and it's not because
I wouldn't expect him to. He's doing a political show.
Hold on. I'm going to I want to ask a question about something you said.
Yeah.
He's not. You're saying these people do talk shows and the incentive is to generate an audience and make money by talking about these other things that they're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying these people, comics, are turning a switch and they're still doing their comedy stuff on stage in comedy clubs, but then creating an entire other lane. Again, D.L. Hughley is the perfect example. He's not doing comedy on his regular show. And I don't think it's just to attract people. I think these comics are sensing that people are turning to them as some sort of like wisdom or wise for some sort of like, well, let's go to the wise comic to understand where we're at. Well, that's my argument.
Yeah, still not buying it. I think what's happened is that D.L. Hughley is doing a talk show, and it is an increasingly political talk show. And when you are doing an increasingly political talk show about an issue that you are serious about, you're going to come off very seriously.
Well, and where I would agree with you, I don't think that's the only thing.
Janine Garofalo did the same thing on Air America.
True. That's true.
Like it's sort of
she was doing a
political. Yeah, she was doing a political talk show, and she got Mark Maron on his Air America show. He was doing a political talk show, and it was like there were a few moments of levity here or there. I believe it was a morning show, but other than that, I mean, it was straight, And then he, I think it's. What I am really struggling with from your from your construction here is that you're putting these guys into a box. You're saying that oh, is it irregular that these people who are comedians who aren't doing comedian stuff when they're talking into microphones hosting shows?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there is a widespread demand, and they are
I
connecting
don't
with
think it's a
audiences
demand.
outside of comedy in a way that we do not see in other forms of entertainment figures,
I don't
and
think
that we
it's a
did not see
demand.
prior to this. So
I don't
you're
think it's a I don't think it's a demand for comedians. I think it's a demand for media. And they stepped into the breach. Now, so the other question I gathered from you, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that why are they the ones stepping into the breach?
No,
Is what
why are they the ones on the front line of the breach? Why do we not? I mean, yeah, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has his Substack and he's talking about this stuff. You don't. Again, if we were to
because
count,
athletes aren't talkers. They're bad at it. Have you watched athlete podcasts? Most of them suck. Most of them are awful. Most athletes are terrible on television.
So let's talk
They're
about the
terrible in
athletes
front of
that are good.
microphones.
So let's talk about the. I think that's a stretch. I
don't think it's a stretch at all. No, most are awful. Most are really bad at what they do.
But they are also similarly athletes. Maybe you would argue they're not. Athletes also, you can say, well, they're not one-dimensional people.
Sure.
They have other interests.
Sure.
They do other things.
That's why the shows exist. That's what I'm saying. So all right. Their shows exist in podcast land. All the Smoke exists. Podcast P. Carmelo Anthony's awful show.
They're not talking politics the same way comics are.
Hold on. Remember, Flagrant didn't start out talking about politics either. They didn't.
But they are now.
They didn't.
Why are we not seeing more musicians? Why isn't Chuck D hosting a political show?
Hold on. Dave Smith is the exception, not the rule. Jimmy Dore is the exception, not the rule. All right? These shows don't necessarily start out, hey, I'm going to talk about politics. Theo Vaughn didn't start out saying, I'm going to start out talking about politics. They said, hey, I'm going to start out with a podcast, and it evolves into what it evolves to. Like,
sure.
it's not, these are not like, but my point construction that I keep getting from you is that these people are coming in like Dave Smith came in and wanted to talk politics. That's not what's happening for the most part.
That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is they're clearly tapping a vein. I mean, Theo Vaughn the other day was basically crying about Gaza in a segment and offered his take, right? And I love he is the perfect example of someone you're talking about, a comedian as a full human being.
Yeah.
Just talking about full human being stuff.
Yeah.
He'd just as soon talk about swimming as he would,
Sure.
And I'm not saying that there's anything that we shouldn't be expecting that. But in an era where everyone is like Instagramming what they had for breakfast and talking about their other interests, like you see musicians do this all the time with their dogs, gardening, whatever they're doing, right? Like other stuff that they do. Why wouldn't someone like Chuck D be reaching this kind of mass? What I'm saying is comedians are tapping into something that they're sensing is there in the public for them to tap into that is not available or sought after from musicians, athletes, or even traditional media people. You spent a lot of this show telling me about how like these CNN, MSNBC people go to podcast land and they don't do as well as expected.
Because it's a different art form. So can I try take a shot at answering your question about Chuck D?
Yeah, of course.
So look, I think that Chuck D, and I think that there's a discipline that has to come with podcasting and success at podcasting. That you kind of have to attack it the way that you would attack music or you would attack comedy, and you have to be there week after week, year after year after year after year. And like Joe Rogan's not Joe Rogan because he started, in a petri dish because some oligarchs gave him money. He's Joe Rogan because he and his buddy Brian Redband started in front of webcams in the late aughts.
And they weren't talking about politics either. Not
Yeah,
with so
at all.
much intention. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what's happened over and over again is that podcasts, especially for musicians and for many people, celebrities too, it was seen as a path to quick money for a little while. So what you had is like these folks flood in, and I think Talib Kweli
I
is a
was going to
perfect
mention
example.
him.
Perfect
Yeah.
example of this. They get in, they get a sponsor, or they get a deal with somebody, they do a thing, and they're like, "Oh, I got an audience," and then it's like, "No, you just got to keep going." You got to keep going, and you got to keep going. And these comics have shown something that the average comic, successful comic, on a podcast has shown something that we haven't seen from most successful musicians, which is the willingness to keep going. What happens with these shows, they go for a while. Some of them are pretty good. I mean, I think a Nick Cannon comes to mind too. Like where his show is pretty good. He caught some flack by having, I think it was it Umar Johnson on there?
I can't remember.
But he caught some flack, and he said some things that was anti-Semitic, that he was accused of, something like that, and then he backed down. No, what you have to do is just keep going, keep showing up. You have to do what Shannon Sharp's doing right now. You got to keep showing up even after everything falls apart. You got to keep going and going and going in order to have success. The trouble is that when these other people from these other forums, whether you're TV, where you're Jake Tapper and you get your first anchor job on CNN, or you're a musician and you broke through and you've got giant hits, you have a big audience, so you're just going to expect an instant big audience. You have to like work your way through the small days up to the big days.
So
and a lot of them aren't sticking through it.
Okay, I'll frame this differently then. Because the more you talk, I see what you're saying, but the more I'm convinced of my original argument. How many comedians were on the front line challenging the COVID policies and our vaccine stance in public?
Yeah.
Versus musicians. Now you could say musicians have more to lose because there was,
I think there's also politics there. Musicians are more socially liberal.
Okay, Ted Nugent isn't. He didn't say shit about the vaccines. Neither did Dave Mustaine. Neither did Dave Mustaine from Megadeth. They didn't make it a point.
But those are two musicians. Like
how many comedians spoke out against this comparative to musicians?
I think
made it their.
I think broadly, how many people did?
Not again, many. How many comedians compared to?
I guess you could argue that more, but sure. But how many people spoke out? Not that many. Most people scared.
It sort of became the groundswell of.
No, actually, it's a very small amount of people did.
What Sam Harris talks about as Podcastistan is what he calls it. He calls it Substackistan. No, the groundswell in the podcast realm and in Substack of voices speaking out, overwhelmingly huge towards comedians in that crowd.
I wouldn't disagree, but I'd also argue that that's a small world.
Okay, but it didn't have as many musicians, is my point, or athletes.
Because not as many musicians are even attempting podcasts. So it's a question that, like, I mean, I don't think you could even have that kind of debate unless you thought about parody musicians
well, why aren't they? Because that says there isn't a cultural demand for it.
No, because that's not how podcasts happen. Podcasts happen because you and me decide to go talk on a Saturday morning.
But then you're arguing that comedians somehow have more discipline to stick out a podcast.
I think absolutely they do.
Why?
Because if you think about the process of how a musician makes money, there's the record company. and there's record deals. And that's how what yes they do tour. I agree. I concede that. But it most most musicians don't they're not becoming big for talking. Podcast comedians become big for talking.
But
Because that's much closer to what they do.
I was gonna say it's not the same thing. It's not, but it isn't the same thing. Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. It's not. It's much
Closer. Yeah, you're right.
Talking and being funny on a podcast is a lot closer to your act than Talib Kweli doing an interview with KRS-One on his podcast. Like it's not like so. It's a closer analog. We watched Akash last year.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Akash on stage was not exactly the same as Akash on Flagrant.
That's right.
But he wasn't far.
I think Talib Kweli and who's the other person I was just thinking of? Fuck, it just slipped my mind. And Draymond Green.
Yeah.
Are further away from who they really are in giving us this full dimensional view that you're talking about that we can now all engage in than comedians are. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
Why are we not getting more? I mean, Draymond Green talked about the vaccine in a press conference after a game. He's not giving us the full. I mean, yes, he's
it's early days.
He's riding the I'm still in the league and I'm talking about NBA
That's part of it.
stuff. But Talib Kweli directly addresses politics with his guests, but it's still not the same. You know who's an exception to this, actually? I'm sorry, I keep snorting snot into the microphone, but Winston Marshall.
Yeah, I was going to mention him. Yeah.
Of oh my God, the fuck that. Oh my God, why
Mumford
can't Mumford and Sons? Thank you. Winston Marshall, whose podcast when he was on The Spectator, I edited the audio for a lot of those episodes. And it was awesome. I never had any interaction with him directly, though. Yeah, he's an example, but he got canceled. so by default.
Well, yeah, I think that's a really good point in that the cancellation element of it is like a piece of this puzzle. Like, for a time, and I'm pretty sure this time is probably past for Winston, but for a time, he lost his band, and if I remember correctly, it was during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't a whole lot of touring going on. So he was just leaning into the thing that he could do to connect with people.
I thought you were going to go in a slightly different direction than I was going to say. I thought you were about to say the thing that I think might prove you right, your argument, which is that comedians in general have less to fear from cancellation than musicians do. And athletes, they have less to lose and more to gain from going in this direction, whereas musicians, they have a lot, and athletes have even more to lose.
Right. Yeah. If you
that's what I thought you were going to say, but you didn't say it.
Well, if you think about it, right? When it comes to free, Netflix, great example. Netflix has stayed away from news. Do you know why?
Do they not want to alienate half their subscribers?
Yeah, one of their CEOs, because they had co-CEOs for the last few years, said that it was divisive.
Yeah, they clearly want to get both. They want to play to the whole room. All right. And they still leave room for people like Chappelle.
Yeah, that's precisely where I was going next.
And so comedians see that and go, "Oh, okay, in this realm."
Not just that. All right. So at the same time, they see comedians as sort of this other world over here where we're like, we're gonna stand up for Chappelle when he says naughty things. we're gonna make this a little playground for these folks. But news, on the other hand, I'm gonna not even touch that stuff. That is just too much for us at the same time. Like, it's interesting. You have three thoughts in your head at the same time. You want to not be divisive, yet you're going to bring in comedians and you're going to keep news away because it is inherently, at least in its current form, divisive.
Yeah. And whereas musicians, especially the established ones, or even not so much, even people at sort of like a middling or to lower level are quick to eat their own and know that they will be eaten by their own, promoters and booking agents and other bands, and management companies will wash their hands if they immediately catch the scent of something that's forbidden that you said.
Well,
hence why they're more fucking quiet. But that's okay. So I totally get your points that this is maybe
political,
more of a structural
social
issue than in terms of like how the media landscape is constituted than just a cultural issue. But I do think if you compared like what boomers felt in like the late 60s for like the Doors and David Crosby, and they were looking to musicians, or even in the 80s in the anti-Reagan punk hardcore stuff.
I think you're mixing like two, like, because I could, your Doors 60s early 70s argument is stronger than the 80s because that 80s stuff was not big.
It doesn't have to be big. I'm talking about its
it
cultural
does.
resonance.
It
I'm
does.
talking about
In order,
okay. I'm talking about
to like have this kind of conversation where it starts, where we're talking about big stars.
No, I'm not just talking about big stars. I'm talking about the public. Hold on a second.
Like, what are we doing?
No, because the way political music was framed in the 80s and in the aftermath of like how that stuff is still talked about, and also the rise of rap music as a political revolution. Chuck D still talks about rap music as a revolutionary force. I agree with you. I laugh at that too. I'm with you about that. But he's not the only one though.
I know.
And here's also,
they're wrong.
I completely agree with you. That's sort of my point, right? Which is that rhetoric around music to me falls completely flat. It doesn't really serve that purpose, especially in a time where music artists are incentivized to all march in lockstep with whatever the accepted, pre-approved talking points of the day are. I cannot tell you how many press releases I get every week that say LGBTQ or queer, in the subject line. Queer, BIPOC is getting less. I guess that's getting phased out. I guess, I don't know. Maybe I should try to get AI to like analyze all my inbox for the last 20 years and see the subjects and see.
Yeah, you should do an in-depth post on that. That would do very, very well.
I'm just curious, like what, to somehow scan through all that content, because I know for a fact that so many publicists are putting that front and center as if that makes these musicians interesting, and it makes them more homogenous. Comedy has more variation, I think, now currently. I don't know whose point that backs up, but I'm just saying that's.
Yeah, I there's an interesting point there. Like I've worked in, for those who don't know, I've worked in journalism, communications, and marketing since well, my first job was in radio. So we're talking 06, it's before I met you. And then when I met you, I was in TV. And now all the way up to government communications. And when I hear you describe what you just described, I wonder how much of that is the artist and how much of that is the apparatus trying to promote the artist.
Can I get it?
Because it sounds way more like the apparatus promoting the artist than the artist themselves.
Do you want to know what I think?
Yeah.
I think it's both. I think there is such a uniformity of groupthink in the music world in general. And I think musicians will tend to tread closest to wherever they think is going to get them attention and approval. And I don't
Mhm.
think that's any different. I can't say that that's different than comics. I just know I've just been around more musicians and seen how the name of the game is to get the audience to love you, right? Um I think
I'm not sure that's the name of the game.
I think if we're going to make generalizations, I'm just throwing this out there. I don't have
Yeah,
any,
it should be the name of the game. I don't think that's it.
but if we're going to talk about personality types in music versus comedy, again, I have nothing to base this on. Maybe I'll just pose this as a question. Does music attract more people who are willing to not people please, but do what it takes to get adulation versus does comedy attract people who are more like, hey, I'm going to give you something to think about that kind of, I'm going to challenge you a little bit more, even though I still want you to laugh with me.
Yeah, I think your description holds. I think that comedians are all right. You can be a highly successful comic today, um, and historically, without the system, giving you a spot.
Right. That's less so in music.
Yeah, you can be successful in music that way. It's yeah, like you said, it's less so.
And to prove your point, which I initially balked at, that he's like, well, this is a way to like generate an audience and make money and generate income. All the comics I'm talking about who are really, really serious, they promote their their shows
Yeah,
they promote their comedy appearances, their
yeah,
comedy gigs on their shows. They're like, oh, we're gonna be in Portland and blah 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 blah.
yeah. I
You know,
wonder how Jimmy Dore is like live. I mean, is he actually funny? I mean, I've seen clips, and I didn't really laugh, but it was clips of his show
mhm.
live. I wonder if his comedy act is different. I don't know.
I think he's funny, but I don't know if I went to an actual show, how much would I laugh? Again, I've never seen Dave Smith comedy, not 1 second of it, and I consider him to be a very thoroughly sourced
Yeah,
and trustworthy, reliable. You know, and there's certain things I don't necessarily jibe with,
same here.
but I find him to be a very very sober source of gateway to information and like an interpreter of what's going on who I really trust. And I just think that's interesting that I'm turning to a comic for that. And he's not just a comic. This is what Dave Murray was trying to, oh, you're just you kind of a comedian kind of a
Hmm.
thing. And I think you're absolutely right. I think he was always interested in this stuff and now has exists in a media space where you can do both. You can do your gigs and you can fucking talk about whatever you want. If it's hot rod cars and you want to fucking talk about that for 3 hours, you can do that if you want.
Yeah, I mean that's. I think in this case, in our media world, encourages you to do that as well because when you are, and these are businesses like all these people that we're talking about,
Definitely.
when one thing dries up you got to have the other thing.
So I guess the question will be one person I will be watching and hoping that two people actually that I'll be watching and hoping who are non-comics, non-musicians is Draymond Green and Richard Sherman. If they can, because now you see Stephen A actually doing what I'm talking about, where he's
Mhm.
really fucking trying to
He's
broaden,
his
be like,
England to run for president.
right. But in terms of his platform, he's trying to sort of encompass it all, right?
Yeah.
Um, I would be curious to see how many more athletes do that. And I also wonder whether athletes are not challenged to do it because they can talk about sports the 24 hours a fucking day and people will fucking, you know,
I think that's part of the equation too.
hang on every word they say and it still generate huge numbers.
Well, I think there's also a third angle that you're missing here. It's practice.
Do tell.
Okay, so Richard Sherman and Draymond Green are going to end up. Richard Sherman's already on Thursday Night Football. Draymond Green has been on the NBA and TNT, but I would imagine he's going to end up on the other, NBA shows once he retires in probably a couple of years. Um, this is practice for him. See, the comedians are not practicing. This is just what they're going to do. They can not just make money off of it, like it's their own flywheel. They are attracting an audience who from all over the country, all over the world, who are going to see them at some point, ideally. Um, who will buy their stand up special, who will buy their Patreons. Um, they're not like the podcast to them is the end game.
Right. Whereas
For
for the athlete, it's
Draymond,
not. Yeah.
for and I think the same thing holds true for musicians. It's not the end
Right.
game.
Right. Also, yeah. So, I mean, I think you're right. And what I was going to ask was, why aren't we seeing more Royce Whites among athletes and musicians as we are among comedians? Like, this is my point that I don't think you're disputing. There are more Royce White type figures. Not set aside the running for office, although Konstantin does want to run for office.
Jeez.
But set aside that aspect of it. Just his ability and his focus on like constitutional issues and
Sure.
politics, right? There are more of those in comedy than there are elsewhere, at least having emerged into media platforms. I think you are correct. There are media structural forces at play that are shaping that. I think you're right. The musician wants to do the gig, the music thing, but you got to think that there's some musicians that just love yapping and they just want to reinvent themselves
And
that
I'm
way.
sure some will. Remember, podcasting is still a young medium.
You don't think it's oversaturated and
No,
on its way out? You don't think it's a
no,
bubble that's going to burst?
no. It's not.
Okay, great.
It's nowhere even near where it will be. Like
Great. You heard
it's
it
like
here first, people.
yeah. Like I think because it's not. We've only scratched the surface of
Okay.
what you can do with it, how you can do it, the technology behind it. I mean, it hasn't jumped the shark anywhere close. Like talk shows haven't jumped the shark. I mean, they've been around forever. Um, Radio hasn't jumped the shark, and it's been around forever. I mean, TV's been around forever. I think we're just beginning to see what can happen, and we're not even truly understanding how to monetize it yet. And as we understand, as the monetization starts to be figured out better, because we're just getting a little bit better, we're not quite where we need to be. I think that it, as an art form unto itself, will get stronger and will be more diversified because the barrier for entry is so low. You're gonna get a lot of crap, and you're gonna get like you know wonderful, crazy things because you can take chances with this that you can't take with other outlets. Like I was talking to someone earlier about movies and just how movies are, have eroded and gotten so awful. And I know long ago I remember telling you that I thought films were becoming an elite activity.
Mm.
And they've not only become an elite activity, kind of like Broadway, they become an elite activity that no, they're becoming exactly Broadway. The
Wait,
more
you
I think
mean
about it.
going to the movies?
Yeah, going
Is that
to
what
the
you're saying?
movie.
Okay.
No, both because it's what we get at home from the movies is derivative from what is at the movies. Like yes, there are direct to consumer movies, Like Netflix doesn't make its own movies, and independent people make movies that don't go to theaters. But most of what we see in these platforms were in theaters at some point, and they were made for theaters. Um, but it's become Broadway, where we're going to remake the same shit over and over again, and some of it is going to be brilliant. Occasionally, you're going to get somebody who does something unique, but the economics and the bet that you have to make in order to make one of these things have gotten so out of whack that nobody wants to take a chance. Nobody does. So when we get to the AI portion of our discussion, that's my one hope for it, because that's something that could conceivably bring down the price of making stuff.
Mm.
So you could get a renaissance of just, new and unique things created.
So that's interesting. Film is another, or the mainstream film industry, or even the independent film industry
Because they
is
all want to
another
be mainstream.
place where I see a similar uniformity of like the way they handle subjects and what they're trying to say, and sort of just calling out, beaming out the same like sort of tired tropes about race and gender and class and I yeah, it's so captured, it seems, by a certain way of viewing the world, that I think more people in comedy have seen right through that. One thing I will say, though, to back your side of this argument, is I see everyday people with, like, tiny followings challenging the status quo on Substack all the time. It's not just comics, right? But I see a dearth of musicians, athletes, other types of entertainers doing the same thing. Even traditional media people stepping out on a limb, right? It's like they want to keep the parachute on and still speak in a lexicon that might keep them relevant in their old lane,
Sure.
right? And I'm just curious as to where we're headed. You're saying that we're going to stay sort of in this where we are, where more and more people are going to do that just by default. They're going to find ways to creatively remix the world and talk about it in ways that are fresh. I hope so. Um,
Well,
I
I wouldn't say creatively remix. I think we're going to see even more than that. I think we're going to see um, uh, that creativity that's not going to make it into TV. That creativity that the thing I left out with the comedians is that a lot of these guys would have been sucked into the sitcom world,
mm.
and sitcom world doesn't exist anymore.
And it would have forced them, or at least
To do
challenged
the Bob
them
Saget,
to completely constrain
Bob
what
Saget,
they were going to say. I mean, look at who was it? My guy, oh my god, Jim Brewer.
yeah, Jim Brewer, yeah.
I mean, couldn't
Shout out to
there's
Jim
no
Brewer.
there's no way he would have been able to say even 1/10 of this shit he's saying now in that world. Fuck no. I mean, I think, didn't he get fired from Saturday Night Live, or have some sort of? I'd have to look that up. I
Uh,
forgot what happened with him.
I think I think he quit, but Bob Saget's the one that jumped out at me, because Bob Saget was an insult comic. He was a filthy comic, and he got offered the golden handcuffs.
And now people know him as Mr. Belvedere. Is it Mr. Belvedere?
No, on Full House.
Full House. Yeah. But totally different than his stage act.
And
It's like
then
shockingly different.
he did America's Funniest Home Videos at the same time, and then eventually as he got older, he went back to insult comedy and did filthy comedy, which was even funnier because it was the dad from Full House doing filthy comedy.
So what I like about your point is that in a prior age,
Mhm.
the media was set up that comedians got their wings clipped as
Yeah.
far as what they could say and what avenues were available to them. And maybe there was more room for, I don't know who would have been in that more so.
Musicians.
Musicians, Marilyn Manson, not that Marilyn Manson's political, but Marilyn Manson got away with saying
Yeah.
whatever the fuck he wanted for a long time until he didn't, right?
Mhm.
Until the ground shifted underneath him and they got Me Too'd and everything like that. To the point where I last year at some point got a press release about a new Marilyn Manson record and approached. I had been in talks with, a really big podcast platform, which you know about, which I won't mention here. And they were like, yeah. Like, I was like, look, can I connect you with the publicist of Marilyn Manson? Would you want Marilyn Manson? They were like, fuck yeah, we want that. Or they were very enthusiastic. And the publicist was like, nah, he's not doing interviews. It's like, how do you, like, in other words, we're his publicist, but we're going to keep him tight-lipped because we want to do damage control and like minimize the damage this guy can do to himself. Whereas in the 90s, if this podcast had been around then, I feel like Marilyn Manson would have dove in with
Oh,
both feet.
or even more likely, this scenario would have happened. He would have gone on Leno or Letterman, acknowledged the thing like Hugh Grant, and we would have moved on.
Right.
But that's not the world of the internet. The world of the internet is that everything that we've said right here, and everybody says all the time, in every news story, right or wrong, that gets posted, just circulates forever and ever and ever and ever. And whether the Wikipedia is accurate or inaccurate, it was on Wikipedia. Therefore, there's going to be a certain amount of people who are just going to have easy access to this thing, and it's this whole other world of questions and circumstances that just did not exist. You couldn't just go sit down with Barbara Walters, say, "Hey, look, I said this, I did this. This sucked. It wasn't illegal. Forgive me." And the world would have been like, "Okay, cool. Like, all right." I still like you. I still like the, God is dead. No, not heresy. I still like the beautiful people. I'm thinking more. God is dead. That's Nine Inch Nails. Heresy. So you can't have that moment now.
No.
It just the closest you can get to it right now is Rogan, and the thing is like the way that the world is skewed politically, that's not even acceptable.
No, because what happens to him is they put a filter over him so he gets misrepresented.
Yes.
So it's not canceled, but
Both literally and
smeared.
figuratively. Like, because literally when he got COVID, Rogan, CNN literally put a filter on him to make him look green.
I know. Yeah. Wow. I forgot about that part of it. I know. To make him look sickly, like a hepatitis B
Yes.
patient or something. Yeah. You can't bring your dirty laundry in your side pocket, wring it out on Barbara Walters like you're saying, and then be done. Now, you're again attributing this to because we have the internet lives forever. I also think clearly you would agree there's an appetite for not only stoning people to death, but bringing them back to keep throwing stones at them as much as possible. There's a new Puritanism. I wonder if we'll move out of that, even though things still live on the internet. But to quote a recent essay of yours,
Yeah.
an actual written essay, not a video, not a radio, not an all of the above radio clip. The scandal economy does not parse nuance.
Oh yeah, totally. And it always did exist. It got amplified with OJ. And
24-hour news cycle shit. Yep.
And that sped it up, and now it's sort of not just 24-hour 365, 12 months a year. Now it's nuance doesn't really matter. It's that Charlemagne line, Um, no one cares about the truth when the lie's more entertaining. Like,
Sure.
um, so the truth might be nuance. There may be, like it may not be black and white, but if the black and white is more fun, then we're gonna go with the or more outraging. By the way, I think there are people, including some I know, who just have fun by being outraged, and the hate watching and hate listening and hate reading. I do it sometimes. I mean, so I think that nuance is a thing that's lost.
Yeah, I mean, again, I do agree with you there. It's certainly gotten amplified, but I would also point out this, if you went back to the 1800s, the period you're talking about with all the local broadsides, I'm sure they didn't give a fuck about nuance a lot of the time too. And
Yeah.
if they could, I mean, yes, we're
Uh,
definitely in a new place with that, but again, like you're saying, there is and isn't anything new under the sun, kind of a thing.
yeah. I
Yeah,
won't go too deep into that, but just to explain that to people who've never heard that before, there's a point in history, I believe, that we're in just sort of this reincarnated yellow journalism age, largely because of both structural forces in our media and just the nature of the discourse that has come out of internet media. And there was once upon a time in cities like Rochester, New York, where there's about 200,000 people, where you would have 10, 20 papers at every newsstand printed daily, giving different perspectives of an issue, some flat lies, some just from one perspective and just omitting another. Um, and I think that what's happened is that what we have stumbled back into an age where we're doing the same thing with our internet discourse.
yeah, where it's overtly slanted, right?
Mhm.
That you're saying back then, it was very openly like people would seek whatever paper
Yeah.
they wanted or its perspective, knowing they were um
And we still do that today.
soliciting a point of view. Yeah, yeah.
And we still do that today. Look, I think to no one's surprise, Fox News is conservative. It was kind of funny a couple of years ago, where they changed the tagline from "fair and balanced" to "standing up for what's right." I just find this hilarious. And then Lachlan Murdoch, Rupert's son, when he took over Fox, he said that he said, "Oh yeah, our primetime shows are like a conservative commentary page." And this was a big story in the media world. Oh my God, Fox News is conservative.
Yeah, it's
I
funny.
mean, like, come on. I mean, of course it is. Like, there's no surprise. And look, there's always been the nation. There's always been NPR. There's always been outlets that have had a bent. I think what's happened in this era is that you've had this combination of bents getting more extreme, and almost everybody having an extreme knockoff of version of them, like Newsmax. If you watch Newsmax or One America News Network, I don't know if you spent some time with there. I
Not
have
really, no, but
it's fascinating. It's a whole other world, and but it's also a whole other world when you spend some time listening to NPR, and it's like the language is different,
oh yeah.
much like it is on One America, or if you spend time with Newsmax, the language is different, the tone is different, their whole picture of the day, the world that they present is like, holy crap, what is this? How uh, uh, the world, this is the world, and then you go over here and like, oh, this is the world. It's not.
Yeah.
No one is giving you a clear view on those extremes, and I think what's worse about this period than it was back then is that you have these folks in the middle, highlighted this past, week or two with Joe Biden and the whole book tour, Jake Tapper, sort of, who vigorously defended Joe Biden's cognitive um, um, abilities up to the moment that he was on international TV, just sundowning in front of the world in a debate with Donald Trump a year ago. Having him put out a book about a year later saying, "Oh my God, I just didn't see it." You didn't see him try to talk to a dead congresswoman?
Yeah.
Like you didn't see this? You didn't see him look doddering or glassy eyed all the time? You didn't see him sort of say, mid sentence, just stop and say, "Oh, you know the thing." You didn't see all this stuff going back a half decade plus. There was a report I remember seeing, I think it was a decade ago. It had to be, because where Barack Obama didn't want him to run for president.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In 2016.
Yeah. I have a question about this, though, about your yellow journalism point. I wonder if there's a difference now, and I can't speak to that time because we weren't alive then. You might know better than me, or you would know better than me. What I get the sense now that people both crave now things that cater to their bias, but they're also somewhat blind and unconscious to the extent of their own bias. So they want the flavor
Yes.
they like because it pleases their taste buds.
Yes.
But they're not aware that their taste buds are calibrated improperly, because I hear
Yes.
so many people talk about, we need to teach people critical thinking.
That's not what they want. That's not what they are not they don't actually want to teach critical thinking.
But back in the 1800s or whatever, or maybe early 20th century, when you're like, nah, I want like a pro union. I want a paper that is on board with my union, my labor union. Was the average person back then, did they know, look, I just fucking want what I want and I know what my bias is? Versus now with algorithms and everything, I get the sense people, yes, you can look at Fox News and go, I'm right wing, or I'm going to watch I'm going to go to the Blaze because I'm conservative. I have these values. But do you know to the extent that everything around you is kind of just tunnel visioning your outlook? I just wonder.
It's an interesting question. I think less of us know. There is back then, just think about it. It's 1920. We're walking around downtown Rochester. It's bustling.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
I know.
You look at these photos, it's crazy. Like there's
Shocked me. Looked like Manhattan, actually,
yeah.
not the skyline, but the crowd.
Yeah, and there were actually complaints that things were too congested. And that we had to do something about the congestion. And then you go look at Rochester now. It's just not that. But we walk up to a newsstand and we look at like all these papers. We see, like the Democrat and Chronicle. We see you see the more conservative paper. You see the Union paper, the religious paper, the Catholic Courier. And you see all this sort of poo-poo platter of different opinions that are all there. Because much like the internet today, ink and paper back then was considered really, really cheap. So you have to make a choice. You have 5 cents, 10 cents, a penny, whatever it is. You have to choose. You can buy a few of them, but you have to make choices. In this era, there are fewer of us making choices. And I think that's the one thing you identified, because the algorithm sort of just is reacting to your high reaction and your low reaction. And there's an increasing amount of nuance, but that's what they're reacting to.
It's shoveling things into your feeding trough for you.
Yeah. So it also, I mean, if you have if you use Google at all, it is watching all of your web traffic, web activity. It's downloading everything that you watch and listen to and say. It can tell everything you email. So same thing with Facebook. Same thing with all these places.
Yeah, you pointed that out to me, I think 15, almost 20 years ago.
Yeah,
It's a long time ago you pointed that out.
and it's only gotten worse.
Yeah. I wanted
So
to oh, sorry.
so yeah, I think you're right. Fewer of us are making choices, at least overtly. Now, I think the other thing that in your description is a bit more interesting to me. I think that because in the picture that I painted about the media world of today, the thing that I didn't mention is you have these outlets, the New York Times among them, Washington Post, hell, even Fox News until they, outwardly said it, who will not admit their biases
Right.
and are accepted by these same companies that are consuming all our personal information in order to spit back to us what they think we want.
Hmm.
They're assuming that these outlets are on the up and up and that there's no bias, there's no slant, that it's that whether it's you, if you're YouTube, you're going to put these places in prominent places because they're safe.
Right, right, because they passed the disinform or misinformation
Yes.
smell test according to these algorithms, which is
Yes.
totally not the case at all. But yeah,
So, um, so among the stuff that's being fed back to us is stuff that is slanted, but not accepted by the algorithm as slanted because they're getting this, pat on the back from, that algorithm magic that we were just talking about.
and doesn't present itself as being slanted. So
Yeah.
everyone who accepts whatever outlet they're getting thinks that's the truth, and everything outside of that is uh, poorly thought out and is not does like whoever believes that other outlet is bad at critical thinking, but everybody's thinking that about everybody else, which is a horrible place to be. Whereas the picture you paint that I envision in my imagination of the yellow journalism era is that people just knew what bias they wanted.
I don't think people thought about it as much as we do now.
Their lives didn't depend on it as much, or the social fabric. Maybe I'm wrong, but now it seems like the social fabric hadn't eroded to the point where they necessarily had to as much. There were time periods that were volatile, I get it,
Mm-hmm.
but people were able to coexist. Now we've said this multiple times on this show, but there is palpable tension and direct, like outright animosity among neighbors, and a sense of really like sharp unease between people for having a fucking lawn sign where the like just even in the neighborhood like where my daughter goes to school, people will not associate with other people based on that. That's fucking scary to me.
Yeah.
Even if it never goes into like civil war, which it could and it couldn't, but even if it doesn't, what a fucking horrible way to just be.
I don't think it's unique to our time. I mean, obligatory forthtelling mention.
Everybody drink.
I mean, it wouldn't be an episode without a mention of Strauss and Howe. But like, I mean, think Scarlet Letter. Think throughout history, think about the North versus the South. Think about
Yeah.
The Yanks versus the what were they called? the the folks who supported England. Yeah, and
I forgot. Oh my god.
um,
Anyway,
so like there were all these. Uh, I think there's been lots of periods of time where, even in outside of the fourth turning element, you think about this, the square kid versus the kid who, the hippy dippy kid, or the militant black guy versus the normal black guy in the 70s, 60s and 70s, you know,
sure.
or the hip hop kid versus, the R&B kid, like in the 80s and 90s. I mean, like it's like, um I think, I agree that the tensions and the fact that it actually ties back to the larger point about comedians, in that it used to be weird for someone to have a conversation and it go political.
Yeah, it would go there from this is conversation land. Oh, now we ended up in politics, and that's slightly
Yeah,
uncomfortable, right? Yes.
both in everyday life and entertainment. Politics was sort of just over there. It was a land over there, and we'd hear about it with like, when we're going to war, or 9/11. But even then, I mean, I was in high school going to college at this point, and like, I don't, I went to a conservative Catholic college, Niagara University, small school. It was me and like four other people holding up signs anti-Iraq war. Like it's just it. Like that was just us. Today, those same kids at that same school, I've seen pictures. They're conservative, small Catholic school, giant protests.
Against
Right?
Gaza, is that what you're saying?
I haven't seen Gaza,
Or not against
but
Gaza,
I
against
haven't,
Israel's
but
campaign in Gaza.
I haven't looked for it. I bet it is occurring for that. But in terms of other, Black Lives Matter,
Okay.
all this stuff over the last few years, so that I couldn't imagine on that same campus, just 20 years ago. So I think what's happened is culturally we are just so much more into politics and feel the need to share our politics, and we feel the need to shun those who don't participate in our politics in a way that just didn't occur even back then.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the more accurate way to say it is, as you're getting at, is that we're in a phase like that, and I don't know because I've only been alive as long as I've been alive, but it would be interesting to compare this to other previous times or even other places, not just in the US, where this has happened, where this has been so it's preeminent now. Our or ideological differences are like those chemistry lab visors that you wear that cover, like you bump against somebody before you have actual contact, the differences in your outlooks make themselves apparent like right off the bat, and that's unfortunate, but we'll see where we end up.
And to go down the Neil Howe, rabbit hole one more time, he said something really interesting in one of his interviews, that he thinks we're in a no growth period.
Mm.
And not even, and I don't know if you're still interested in bridging over to AI,
I am, and I wonder. Yes, yeah.
because I think between our birth rate dropping, AI eating away at our work, we've already seen it. Klarna is a great example. I don't know if you're familiar with Klarna.
I heard about that whole that they 80% of their workworce or
Something like,
something, or
I don't think it was 80.
75.
I thought it was like 40 or something like
Okay,
that,
okay, okay.
somewhere in there. But nearly half their workforce just gone. All right. Um, and more and more people I talk to and interact with, where it's eating away at us all. At the same time, there's not really growth. At the same time, wage growth has basically been nothing for a long time. I think it does something mentally and emotionally to a population. When you grow up, you watch your parents struggle, and then you go to school, and then I think you get there. You feel more vulnerable. I think because of societal incentives, you feel more open to speak out about issues in a way that you wouldn't when during a time of large amounts of growth, where you could make you feel like you could make your fortune or live well. um I think just mentally, intellectually, you feel different. You feel like you feel like your voice is needed in a different way.
So you're saying that if there were more financial promise just throughout society, we wouldn't feel these differences kind of chafing against each other quite to the same degree. If people were basically all had access, felt like they had access to doing better.
Money is cartilage.
It's definitely something. I'll share a quick anecdote from 2011. I was in a period where I was having a lot of anxiety episodes. So my anxiety presents itself as I think my heart's going to stop. And I've had many of these comedic instances where I've been at a doctor and I'm like, "Can you feel it? Can you feel it getting faster?" Like, dude, there's nothing wrong with your heart. I even went to a cardiologist and did the treadmill test,
Mm-hmm.
and they basically the cardiologist got pissed and essentially threw me out after doing the test because like, you shouldn't even be here. There's nothing wrong with you. So I ended up landing a gig, and the person who got me this gig gave me $1,200 in cash that same day, and my anxiety disappeared. Not for good, but there
Well,
was a
yeah, yeah,
sharp,
I get it.
demonstrable difference, and I was like, "Whoa, okay, there's a correlation here for sure."
Yeah.
So, so yeah.
I think when culture and society feels unstable, I think, and when our personal, I've gone through periods of myself. I mean, you shared a nadir. I'll share one of mine. Um, I got laid off twice in a year,
Mm,
and uh, I it was actually when I was filming my first podcast. Um, and then what happened was, I was really broke. I was looking for work, and then the starter on my old car died,
mm.
and it's on South Clinton Avenue. I was living in Rochester. I didn't have any off-street parking, and it's February in Western New York.
And you can't leave a car in just one spot, right? Is the alternate side
Yes,
right? So you could, yeah, you'd get a boot or tickets and then a
yeah.
boot eventually, right? Right.
So what? But I couldn't move the car, and I couldn't pay to fix the starter. At that point, it would have cost a couple $100. At that point, it felt like impossible.
Right,
Felt
right.
and so lazy as me. No, it wasn't really even lazy as me, because it was just sort of like it was because it was a super cold winter. All of a sudden, there's a giant snowbank on my car, and I couldn't dig it out. And then I'm like, all right, I'm just going to leave it.
Yeah, because that bought you a little bit more time, didn't it?
Yeah,
Because you're not going to get penalized for not being able to do that.
thankfully,
Right, right.
we're not that bad, around here. Okay, but I started to get tickets.
Mm.
and I couldn't pay the tickets. I couldn't move the car. So, as it starts to get warm and I find a freelance deal, and I get I think I was out of unemployment because I used the unemployment for the first layoff. And it's like it takes like a year to or whatever it was. It was this weird window where like I didn't have any money. I was like totally money, couldn't pay my rent. Like I think I had to borrow money from a friend just to pay the rent, and just like what the hell? Everything's
Right, you were
falling apart.
facing having to almost move into the car that you couldn't move.
Yes. Yes. It
Yeah.
was insane. And then I just remember like, fuck, my friend paid the rent for February. And then I'm like, crap, how do I pay March? So I just remember there, it's raining, it's cold rain, early March.
Your
I'm already
prospects
late
are
for rent.
looking bleak. Your situation is dire.
And I'm staring as I'm salvaging this car that's perfectly fine except for like a $200 starter repair. And I'm like, my heart is just like, boy, this might be the worst moment of my life. I lost the apartment later that year. I remember I was moving out, and it was, and I was going to move into like a room in somebody's house, and I come out and I see my chair, and there's this bum sleeping in my chair, and I'd only been inside for like 15 minutes.
We don't say bum, James. We say unhoused now.
Bum. Uh, no,
Hobo.
no shade to that dude. I hope he had a good time in my chair. But the thing is, like, man, I felt physically like this utter insecurity.
Sure.
I just as a person, I don't know what was at that point. I was like 30 or approaching 30 or something, right around there. So I was. It does something to you physically.
Yeah, it's a constant stressor on your nervous system, which then expresses into a sense of total lack of safety. Really, like your system's like, we are not in a good. We're in a precarious spot. We're unsafe. It's like if you were sitting on a highway in the middle. It's part of your brain will go, get the fuck out of here, right?
Yeah.
So it's like that, except you can't just pick up and leave because you need to find a way to generate income to get yourself out of harm's way. So what happened? What did you? I mean,
It took a man to dig out of that hole.
yeah,
Oof. So I freelance, and I am. This is where I was editing this TV show for this church,
okay,
and um I ended up living in this spare room of this house of these guys who no, this upper apartment of these two drug dealer dudes
whoa,
who were obsessed with fish. So like
whoa,
it's like fish like in so like there are fish tanks everywhere.
oh, fish, the creature, not the band. I
Not the
thought you
band,
meant the band.
but it did smell like patchouli. But
Okay, so they
but
were white drug dealers. Is that what you're saying?
yes,
Okay,
yeah, they
okay.
were white drug dealers. Um, and one worked at like what was it? Um, one worked at like a 7-Eleven, and the other one was selling baseball bats. Like on that he bought on reselling baseball bats that he bought on eBay.
What the fuck?
Yes.
How was he
Um,
doing with that? What
it was
raking?
enough to survive in a house with two other dudes.
Weird. Wow.
So, and I think it was under the table. I think, but I don't know. I didn't ask. Um, and then eventually, like I clawed my way in up. I got some help from some people. You know, uh, and I bounced around from shitty job to shitty job. Eventually, got back on unemployment because I was off it long enough. It was the worst period of my life, financially and professionally. Um, um, and then I'm living with those dudes, and then my brother dies, and then that was terrible, and then um, and yeah, I barely survived.
Really?
like like
What do you mean you barely survived?
well, I
Okay,
didn't
okay.
die, but
Well, yeah, clearly.
financially, I was holding on to the bottom rung.
You
Like I
barely
was,
scraped by is what you're
yeah, yeah,
saying.
I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
I
okay.
was
Yeah.
like I was just total bum. It took a good like year and a half to sort of like climb out of that.
Mm.
Ironically, I'm that's I ended up working at oh yeah, I ended up working on a murder trial. Um, uh,
You told me about that. You told me about that.
but that's for another day.
It is
Um,
quite
um,
gruesome, actually.
yeah,
That
yeah.
case. Yeah.
I ended up working on a murder trial. I had like a series of the weirdest jobs that on the planet. And then I met my girlfriend in the period, my current girlfriend, right in the middle of all that. Um, and I delivered pizzas. I was working at Home Depot, and I was working at this law firm, and when I met my girl, and then it, that was sort of the last 6 months of just like awfulness. Eventually, I ended up working. I got a full-time job, like so. Like yeah, it was like good 2 years of just utter, just madness
Wow.
and bottom rung life. So yeah, it does something to you physically and mentally, and I think societal wise, I think we've gotten much poorer than we realize. Just to go back macro,
Sure.
the people my age, I'm 41, just turned 41. Um, you you entered with the financial crisis, and you see your colleagues get laid off, or you get laid off yourself, and your wages get stunted. Um, and then I talked to so many people. My example there was sort of an extreme version of this, but there's most millennials I know have been through some variation of some degree of what I described, where it's just like you're just either dealing with this long period of unemployment and just this lack of belief in the system.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you, which generation is it that feels totally hopeless about even having home ownership in their future or career, or is it Gen Z that feels aware? Is it like which is millennials? Because millennials are already out of the house. So
But home ownership, a lot of us are buying houses.
right, so aren't you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, and which is it millennials that a lot of them just have gone back to live with their parents after school and
Uh, that's the younger cohort
okay.
that's doing that more and more. I mean, once you're 35, I mean, I don't know. Most people aren't as militant as my mom, but was like, oh, you got a job, get out. like no. But a lot of these sort of the much younger kids, um, the next generation coming up after us, they are just sort of, they seem stunted.
And maybe this is the perfect segue to talk about the macro picture with AI, because I feel like there's this sense of, there was already a sense of unease, which is what you and I were just talking about, that just pervading about our financial future viability, just as people being able to make ends meet. Clearly, to bring Neil Howe back into it, previous generations, they just had the sense, oh, you could either get a job that would last you most of your until retirement, or you could get a degree and that you would be a professionally viable person. Now that seems to be all but blown to smithereens. But thankfully, JB is saying the podcast bubble is not burst yet, so that's take that to heart, people.
Yeah. I don't want to totally blow up this person's spot, but it just reminds me of something I saw on LinkedIn recently.
But so while you do that, I'll just keep until you're ready
Yeah.
to. But now it's being piled on. There's already this like heightened tension about what are we going to do economically, and now we have the perceived threat of AI muscling in on jobs that were scarce to begin with. Can you talk about that?
And I think, and I won't show this on the screen, but I'll read this thing because it does speak to what you're describing. All right, let's see. I think I just saw this. Yeah, I just saw this on
LinkedIn?
LinkedIn yesterday. I stopped putting my master's degree on my resume. I'm proud of the accomplishment in the fact that I'm the only one in my immediate family to obtain one, but nobody cares. And I'm sort of starting to not care either. 2 years postgraduate degree. I've worked at a call center. I was a middle school teacher, did freelance gigs, and collected unemployment. I've been rejected from all kinds of entry level roles only to be where I am currently, a temporary position, no PTO or health benefits, and making slightly above minimum wage. Oh, and them loans I took out for that degree, they're overdue. Just being transparent.
Whoa. And that's somebody who put their name, they put that on their fucking LinkedIn.
Which is an extreme, but yeah. Yeah. Crazy, right?
Yeah.
So I think that speaks to sort of where you were going. I think there is this, we're already seeing AI eat away at low end work and eat away at high end work.
Hmm.
And I think it's also, we're going to get to quickly, it appears, a place where it's going to eat away at the middle as well. Where does that leave the rest of us?
I've been asking you that for months now.
Man. I think if you're standing in place right now and you're like mid-career, you're silly. Like you can't just sort of assume that your skill set as is going to survive. Like you're hearing from a guy who's had to remake himself about 3 different times, maybe 4. I think that's going to be everybody next, especially every white collar worker. I think of at one point I relied on my video editing skills, as I said, to edit a local church's TV show. Have you seen the latest update from Descript?
No, but I mean, I know I know what you're getting at, which is that now people can just turn to an AI platform to do that a lot of that for them.
And they're getting better at it, and they're getting really good at it. And they're getting to the point where they're gonna need little human attention to do it perfectly.
But then what do we do when we get there, and how can we afford to do anything?
It's a really interesting thing. Like one guy I follow, his name is David Shapiro. He talks about post-labor economics, where he is thinking that we're going to have so much unemployment that we are going to have to look at economics entirely differently. And while I agree with him, I don't agree with how we get there. He thinks that we're going to he is more altruistic, at least thinks that the system is more altruistic than I do. I don't think the system is altruistic at all. I think that the system is the system. They will benefit the people who are in position to be benefited from it. They're not going to be worried about the mass public.
But I have a question for you and Dave Shapiro.
Yeah. Let's try to get him on.
Great idea. Doesn't the system depend on consumer buying power?
That's his argument too, and I agree that it does to a certain degree. Now, you do realize, like, the Great Depression was not 100% unemployment. It was kind of like, if I remember correctly, it got into the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
I could see a scenario where we don't get to like 100% unemployment. We get to some place where it's like 15% is normal.
And billionaires are still making huge profits. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. So fuck the people, and especially with a declining birth rate.
Yeah.
Fewer people to worry about.
Yeah. Where there's just less of a where everything just sort of slows down a bit.
This is not AI related, but it's on the same continuum. James and I live in a city, the birthplace of a supermarket named Wegmans, which, if anybody's listening from the New York City area, then you know about it, because there's a Wegmans in New York now, and there's in Philadelphia and as far south as Virginia. It's an awesome supermarket chain in a lot of ways, but they are really moving full speed on replacing the checkout cashiers with self-checkout. And now it's the Wegmans I go to. There's like they've expanded the self-checkout area to the point where like 3 whole lanes of that used to be cashier operated are gone. It's really noticeable when you're there. And I just wonder, it's like, the more you chip away at jobs for people, who's spending money on Amazon and Netflix and whatever else, and even gas and buying cars and buying homes, and like, at what point does it just fall on itself? But I wondered the same thing during the pandemic, and I guess the pandemic, all this money went upwards. I was like, well, how the fuck are these people making money? Where's the spending? And billionaires still made out like bandits then too. I still don't fully understand how, but they did.
Oh, I think there's a few things that happened, and I think that that's a really good analog. There was stimulus, so we didn't have full UBI, but we had variations of it.
Yeah.
Student loans paused, rent and some mortgage payments paused depending on your circumstances. If you think about that, that's giving a massive raise to a lot of Americans by just doing that. And then on top of that, there was a massive uptick of unemployment in terms of unemployment wages. There was, if I remember, there was like a $500 bonus. When did I get unemployment? When I was left USA Today. So let's say, I was getting an extra 500. Think about that. Plus, so I think the top end is like $500 in New York State a week, and then think about having that doubled.
Sure.
All of a sudden, you get into the point where you're not wealthy, but you're not hurting as hard as much. That you got a little bit more cartilage in that knee as it's moving. So, and they were extended, meaning federally extended. So the periods where they were receiving this weren't 10 weeks or 15 weeks or whatever. It was a year in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So all this money slushed into the system. Not enough to make you wealthy, but enough to make you feel good.
That you could spend it, to think that you could spend it.
Yes. So what happened is my money did make it back up. Also, I left out the PPP loans. Oh man, the PPP loans, people got away with it because it got to a point because based on your losses, you could apply and the government will give you a certain amount of money to like just survive. And sometimes in some cases that was millions of dollars or tens of millions. A lot of cases it was tens of thousands. And I'm not saying anything's wrong with it. I'm saying that that's what happened. So what we did is we escalated a policy that we had been doing over the last couple decades where we printed a shit ton of money. And we gave it to the population in different ways. And that is one scenario as AI hits and sort of hollows out the workplace more and more, where, that student debt jubilee that the Trump administration has, doesn't want and that a lot of red states fought. I think it happens. I think I don't think we're going to get a straight up UBI, but I do think that things around the edges will probably happen and make things more affordable.
So isn't that just basically an indirect government stimulus package for businesses to have a customer base that's going to spend money on them and patronize them? Isn't that basically what, like, so it's like by proxy using the public as a platform to just, here's a bunch of money you can spend to keep the economy afloat.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, this collides head on to the video you wanted to talk about, because I'm just flabbergasted and frankly disgusted at the tone of the video. I was like angry, and I only watched 60 seconds of it. I didn't. Okay. It's like 8 minutes long or something, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
I bailed on that. I was like, "Fuck this."
So, you want to play a little stop the
yes. tape? Yeah.
All right. So whenever you want to stop the tape, just speak up.
I'll just raise my hand. Yeah.
I think we have the opportunity here to kind of completely reimagine what it means to use a computer.
Sam is a rare visionary.
Okay, this is where it first got kind of like, all right, I'm James Brown. I have James Brown Corp. I'm going to make a propaganda video about James Brown Corp, and I'm going to have one of the Coppolas film me as I'm walking past skyscrapers in my office.
Which is it, Sofia Coppola?
I believe so, yes.
Oh,
she's
God.
thanked at the very end.
Oh, boy.
The part of it that you didn't get to was at Francis Ford Coppola's cafe.
Oh God, they're sitting there, right? Like
Yes.
I got to the part where they're sitting on bar stools at something.
Yes,
I'm glad you said propaganda, because that was the word that came to me was propagandistic when I was
shoulder.
Oh, it's a story of friendship, Saby. It's not about commerce at all. It's about friendship.
Honestly, when I was watching this, I wasn't sure whether they weren't intentionally hinting at a gay undercurrent to all this on purpose. And I was like, oh, gay eye. I was like, what are they getting at here? Because this takes for fucking ever for them to get to the point. Where's all the homeless people at?
Good question.
Where's all the homeless people in San Francisco? Yeah. Did they
Maybe
shovel?
this is
Did
what-
they street clean them off? Did they like have a shovel-headed vehicle just like sweep
like
to
what
the
happened
side?
with Chairman G?
I'm not familiar, but
No. Chairman G came to San Francisco, and they got rid of all of the homeless people.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, like, I cannot stand techno-utopianism anyway, although I do think there are some really promising applications for AI, which we did not get into, but, I don't like techno-doomerism, although I lean more that way, but this is just...
Shout out to Jim Kunstler.
This is just so... This is... Either they're being tone deaf on purpose, or they're really fucking tone deaf. Jim would have a seizure watching this video, and I bet you he's gonna...
I hope on the next old bald white guy cast he does, which is out today, by the way. Him and Tom Luongo and Dave Collum.
I hope he freaks the fuck out on this video and like has a Beavis, like, when Beavis would get all vibraty and the bubbles would. So I hope that happens on his next podcast, because this is what he's been criticizing on fucking steroids,
without a doubt.
That leads him to be.
Look, but wait, stop for a second. Who is supposed to be the fucking audience for this that's taking forever to even announce what the fuck it is?
It is an excellent question. I don't know.
Because like, it's on OpenAI's YouTube. Okay, so we know. Yeah. But who are the hubris of them to think even their audience has the patience to sit and watch them fucking like get slather each other with mutual admiration.
Yeah,
for an entire intro video. Like,
by the way, Johnny Ive has the millionaire strut, the Vince McMahon, Conor McGregor.
Be able to
look at his arms. I swear,
he's unmatched.
What? Oh, so I didn't recognize that, dude. That is funny. I asked you this at first when you texted me this. I was like, are those dudes even real, or are they AI deepfakes to show us that AI can do this? Because the way he's walking is like, I wasn't sure if these dudes were even real. I recognized the other guy vaguely, but
Sam Altman.
He just seemed familiar.
Yeah, he's leads OpenAI.
Yeah, so. But
Johnny Ive, for those who don't know, is the guy who designed the iPhone, and he designed the Apple Watch and the MacBook Pro.
So they're gonna get together and fucking basically like do the career equivalent of Touch Tips and have this like techno company baby that is supposed to promise us what exactly?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I sent it to you, and it's one of the things I've been fascinated with as over the last few days. So I want to, maybe we'll fast forward and get to that,
or just let it play without us fucking interrupting every 10 seconds.
I'm having fun.
Music, fuck this music.
By the exhilarating optimism of San Francisco and Silicon Valley.
It's beautifully shot.
We are sitting at the beginning of what I believe will be the greatest technological revolution of our lifetimes.
What just an utterly the hubris. I mean, it's just slathered all over this. It's wonderful gauzy hubris. This is the greatest technological revolution of our lifetimes.
Well, and thanks to us is the subtext.
No, not just us. Thanks to me.
Yeah. Well, those two guys is what. Yeah. So, and like, again, is the hubris intentional? Are they basically like, fuck you? Or are they so unself-aware that they're completely misreading their target for who this video is supposed to be. And also, fuck this music. The music also makes me angry.
Okay, tell me more about your anger about the music.
Because it's emotionally manipulative on purpose. I mean, any score is supposed to be, but this is like way over the fucking top. This is obnoxiously, you're being pandered to, as it's so sentimental and drippy and like, ugh, it's gross. It would be like if this were an actual film, it could be ruined by a score like this. Like an artist would know not to go that far, for the most part, if they have good instincts.
Well, if they have good instincts.
I have a growing sense that everything I've learned over the last 30 years has led me to this place and to.
Okay, do you what?
Espresso and whatever, like what? Why?
Yeah. No need. And as we listened to this, I was watching this before we started, and I was thinking, did they have people? You think they hired actors to be in the cafe?
Probably. It looks.
And then cleared them out.
I don't know.
Because if you just listen to the next stretch.
So what is this announcement we're talking about?
2 years ago, John and I started talking about
how long into the video is this?
How long is this?
Into the video, did they say, so what is this announcement you're talking about? How long did it get to the point?
Just about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
That's a long wind up.
That is a fucking eternity to expect people to sit through and be on the edge of their seat while you're fucking, dicking around getting lattes with bottles of wine behind you. This would have been cooler if they met on a park bench somewhere with a nice view, immediately launched into a bit of dialogue of them talking about the meat of what they're trying to say, and then sort of slowed up to that point, and then maybe change the background behind them so that they're in an arcade, they're in a computing center, that would have been cooler. And you could do this in a minute.
This is this needed another edit.
What the future of it.
Hey, James is for hire.
I am for hire. You can yeah, I got your back, Sam Altman.
New kinds of computers was going to look like. I was running OpenAI. Johnny's running a design firm called LoveFrom that had established itself as really the, I think, densest collection of talent that I've ever heard of in one place and probably has ever existed in the world. And it became very quickly apparent to both of us that we needed a third company.
A year ago, I founded IO with Scott Cannon, Evans Hankey, and Tang Tan, who are the most extraordinary engineers. They have built a team of remarkable subject matter experts that range from hardware and software engineering, physicists, researchers, product manufacturing experts. And so IO is merging with OpenAI.
Formed with the mission of figuring out how to create a family of devices that would let people use AI to create all sorts of wonderful things.
The first one we've been working on, I think, has just completely captured our imagination.
Johnny called one day and said, this is the best work our team has ever done. Yeah. I mean, Johnny did the iPhone. Johnny did the MacBook Pro. I mean, these are like the defining ways people use technology. It's hard to beat those things. Those are really wonderful. Johnny recently gave me one of the prototypes of the device for the first time to take home, and I've been able to live with it. And I think it is the coolest piece of technology that the world will have ever seen.
The products that we're using to deliver and connect us to unimaginable technology, they're decades old.
Yeah.
And so it's just common sense to at least think, surely there's something beyond these legacy products.
We have like magic intelligence in the cloud. If I wanted to ask ChatGPT something right now about something we had talked about earlier, think about what would happen. I would reach down, I would get out my laptop, I'd open it up, I'd launch a web browser, I'd start typing, I'd have to explain that thing, and I would hit enter and I would wait and I would get a response. And that is at the limit of what the current tool of a laptop can do. But I think this technology deserves something much better.
Okay.
More invasive, more intrusive on, yeah.
This is why I was so intrigued with this, and I think this intrigues a lot of other people too. What the fuck is this? Because there was also a news article that came up. I think it was in the New York Times. Johnny Ive and Sam Altman interviewed there and a few other places, and then there was a leaked audio of an OpenAI meeting that claimed that it wasn't glasses, that it wasn't a phone, that it might be an implant. It might be a pendant, kind of like Star Trek. I don't know. And also, I'm just thinking of some of the claims there. Something that it's like magic in the cloud. You're not going to have to go grab for it.
Right. And I don't know why he said laptop. Nobody pulls their laptop out at a cafe.
Yeah,
they just go
pull
to
out
the
a
phone.
phone.
Yeah, that was weird. So right. So something that you can access the cloud while talking to someone else.
Yeah.
It would have to be visual but they said it's not glasses. So
Yeah. And I'm wondering if this is going to be like Segway Scooter. remember?
I don't know what that is. No.
You don't remember that?
No.
Dean Kamen.
Nope.
Back in the late 90s, there was this Dean Kamen, this inventor, came out and proclaimed he was going to change the world. He was going to create this thing that cities could be built around, and it was going to be massive and giant thing, and it was the Segway scooter.
Okay.
You know what a Segway scooter is? It's one of these scooters that you can stand on and you lean it and you can.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes police use those. Yeah.
Yeah. And when that was announced in the late 90s, this inventor was like, oh, yeah, we can remake humanity around this thing.
Right.
So,
we can do civic design differently and get around differently. And
so it could be something, that's a dud like that, but I am willing to, especially when I've worked with Claude and ChatGTP and Gemini and all these AI platforms, I'm willing to at least explore what else this could be. And I figure we'd have a brainstorming session.
Do they not reveal it in the fucking video?
No, not at all.
God.
It's next year.
Wow. That's gross.
Is it here, I think?
No, it said thank you, Coppola family.
I'm 2 or 3 times
better
OpenAI.
Yeah.
Narrate me everything. I want a narration.
Yeah, I think it said it's next year.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I guess somebody can translate that to something to English as far as what this is actually going to mean. I mean, they're obviously hyping something up, and is it going to be something really invasive?
I think we have the opportunity.
That's
to
one scenario.
Reimagine.
Oh, let me turn that off. There we go.
Fuck that guy. Shut his ass up.
Yeah, but yeah, it could be something really invasive, or I mean, I don't know how you keep those promises. You know what I mean?
Unless they have something ready to unveil that is really truly a quantum leap of some kind. And I wonder, what does the rest of the billionaire class know about this? Like, what does Elon and all the other fucking, Bezos and all those other, subhumans think
And let me
or know
let me
about what these guys are planning.
and let me bring up an article that helps us get a little bit more detail. All right. I don't know.
100 million AI companion devices.
Yes. All right.
And they're not XR glasses. Now, do you think these guys leaked this on purpose?
It's possible. Um, the product will be capable of being fully aware of a user's surrounding in life and will be unobtrusive, able to rest in one's pocket or on one's desk, according to a recording of an OpenAI staff meeting reviewed by the journal. The device will be a third core device a person would put on a desk after a MacBook Pro and an iPhone, per the meeting, which occurred the same day, Wednesday, as this video was released.
Okay, so I mean, basically, according to this, it's just a souped up version of what AI can do with more sensitive, like, ability to process what your surroundings are.
The device will attempt to wean users from screens.
Whoa.
It would be a more seamless interaction with users that doesn't involve putting up a phone or opening up a laptop. The products that we're using to deliver and connect us to unimaginable technology, they're decades old.
Wow, said Ive in a video introducing yesterday's announcement.
Yeah.
In the film, the AI device sits in Joaquin Phoenix's character's shirt pocket and sees and hears what he does. We didn't watch that. I didn't watch that part. Joaquin Phoenix was in the video?
No.
Okay.
They're compared because it sounds a lot like her.
Okay. The movie Her. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So this is the other big rumor, which is OpenAI and Ive will not be the first company to attempt to create such a device. The Humane AI pen, which Altman invested in, recently tried to disrupt the entire smartphone paradigm and flopped spectacularly. It was led by former Apple executives, but they weren't Johnny Ive and they weren't Johnny Ive, and Humane didn't have OpenAI's level of investment and influence. That said, it was also just riddled with bugs and inaccurate responses. Even though OpenAI's models will have still have major hallucination problems, they are still some of the most capable on the market. In this regard, maybe OpenAI will have a better shot.
Okay, so I mean, this really boils down, cuts down to size all the pomp and circumstance of the video. This is kind of like, well, we'll kind of see. Like the last thing was riddled with bugs. This really undresses a lot of that grandeur and extravagance that these guys are, pretension that these guys are coming across with, and kind of throws some salt, like several grains of salt, into the whole thing.
It could be one of those things where, remember the Zune, and Apple wasn't the first to do an MP3 player or even an MP3 player phone. They just did it better.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's that.
Or in a way that caught on. It's not right. That reached market penetration.
Yeah. Maybe they're just trying to do this pen, and but if it's a pen, you wouldn't have to take it off, right? And if it is a pen, like, how do you talk to it?
I don't know, and I don't.
And how is it aware of the world around you?
Right. I don't know if it right, and if it sits on your desk or in your pocket.
Yeah. That's the mystery of this. That's why I find it fascinating.
And is it strictly audio based?
I mean, increasingly, ChatGPT and Claude and all of them are audio based. It's about, they want you to be able to have a conversation with them and have it talk back to you.
Yeah, well, and again, I am not completely opposed to AI. I'm still sort of grappling with how it can be ethically well, how it's going to fit in and how we're going to fit into to the world that it creates if it does indeed reshape the world. I was reading somewhere, I don't remember where, but like or maybe it was a YouTube clip. It's like we invent technologies like the car, for example, but then the world around us changes to accommodate what the car can do. So then all of a sudden you have like suburbs and things that are spread out more. You see what I mean? And I'm still wondering, well, what is this going to look like for us in terms of how we engage it? But I'm beginning to see things that really do open up extraordinary possibilities. I mean, you and I have talked about this off camera. Just the way it can free you up if you direct it the right way,
Mm-hmm.
the way it can make space for you and take care of some of the grunt or a lot of the grunt work is
Sure.
quite amazing. And what kind of Faustian bargain are we making to get that? I mean, I've heard lots of people say, "Oh no, the threat of it is exaggerated." Blah 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 blah. It's like, okay, I mean, maybe so, but I want to. I don't know that we're in a position to truly know. We don't know. We never know what the unintended consequences are going to be until we get to them. You know?
Right. Right. Like, I don't think people thought. I mean, I guess Neil Postman kind of, had an idea, but this whole dopamine rush, social media, smartphone sort of world. I think if we had this conversation 20 years ago, we probably would not have anticipated it to get this bad.
Right. And so for people to just kind of shrug off and say, "Oh no," about this thing that can do like really miraculous stuff. And then say, well, it's limited, it can only do so much. It's going to somehow be able to do more than than it had been intended to.
It already is.
How so?
I mean, I think that like Claude, the Anthropic model, apparently it could do a task for 7 straight hours without human interaction or correction.
What do you mean do a test?
Meaning you can give it parameters, tell it what to do, and do 7 straight hours of human level work, high-end human level work for 7 straight hours without being corrected.
Whoa. Okay. And that was not originally, that's beyond what its designers thought it could do. Is that what you're saying?
What's happening is they keep testing and they keep pushing these things and they keep giving it more compute and seeing what it can do.
Okay.
They're not like saying we want it to do X. It was like,
Right.
Okay, what if we give it more of X or Y or Z, and what can it do?
And what happens if, and I can already see certain people who either are or they claim to be very well versed in computer science, and to those people, hats off to them. But we've seen many, many, many cases in technological development where the people who are trained in the processes that lead to that advancement don't have the fucking foresight to foresee what's going to happen once this technology hits the ground. What happens if these things break free of the constraints that are put on them? And also, you have to think governments are using these for like warfare purposes against other governments,
or they will. If they haven't, they will.
And I'm not even just talking about conventional war with weapons blowing things up and bombing and killing people. I'm talking about information as warfare and the presenting bots and stuff as people and using false footage and shit like that.
Yeah, if they haven't, they will.
Yeah. Well,
I just think of Remember that Eminem video Mosh? When
No, I've
Eminem
never
did
seen it.
he did a protest video, and like you know, and in that video, um, he, you know, and I think a lot of people believe that this was happening, that the Osama bin Laden in the cave stuff was filmed, and it was faked, and none of that went down the way it did, and like, there's a lot of belief out there that elements of our governments would do that kind of thing, and if
Or
we're
are
presented
doing it.
in it or doing it,
Yeah.
and if presented with a technology where they could seamlessly do that kind of stuff, no doubt they would.
Or set it up so that it initiates doing it on its own.
Yeah,
They don't even have to handhold it.
yeah. Well, they wouldn't even have to. It's not. They could wash their hands of it. You know, it's like they'd be the new Patsy.
Yes. And then at the same time, I marvel at how this is using AI in specific ways for specific tasks. You know, ChatGPT just propositioned me to help me organize my schedule of video posts and all my content creation, to map it out into a regular schedule. If ChatGPT helps me do that, now it didn't initiate that out of the blue. I mentioned something
Yeah,
in passing to it about how, you know, it might take me some time because I'm still getting my schedule ready and figuring out the flow. And I was like, oh, actually, I can help you. And I'm going to give it all. It said, okay, do you want to send me all the topics you have, and I can help you organize this? If that's the case, and ChatGPT helps me do that, that would solve the biggest problem in my existence. Like, that right there is the biggest issue I have in life, is getting something into a routine flow. If fucking ChatGPT does that for me, that's an extraordinary transformation or transformational impact on me and the way I'm living and working and producing. And I'm excited to see what it comes up with. Because even if it's like crude and not quite there, if I tweak a few things, just seeing it laid out in written form would be helpful enough. A big help. So I'm like, if it can do that for me, what else could it do that could help us on a macro level that would be positive? Because there's going to be positives and negatives to this, right? It's not all negative. What are the unintended positive consequences too?
sure. Look, I think we will end up, you know, like the guy Shapiro that I mentioned, he is convinced that AI will solve aging.
How?
We're already using it, and Sam Altman's talked about this a lot. A lot of schools and researchers are already using it to speed up their development of drugs and
Okay.
and technology, and that about, you know, you add things like CRISPR that already existed pre, and also obviously mRNA, that existed pre AI. The amount that you could speed up, because I think that's the most powerful thing about this, is what you're describing is something that you know, and it helping you through as you do your work. It's you speeding up your process of doing the work. Just imagine applying that to something like a researcher. Like, what happens is, like, you know, I think the Viagra story is perfect, right? Viagra was supposed to be, like, I believe, a heart drug. And it turned out to be one of the most profitable, you know, obviously an erection pill in the history of mankind. So but they were trying to do one thing, and it actually got to a different place.
Right. I didn't
And
know that, but
yeah. and that's not the only one. There's a lot of cases of that in terms of development of you know, medicines. Going to the moon, we develop all sorts of products. We should be trying to go back into space, not even because, you know, Elon wants us to occupy Mars or Trump wants us to go back to the moon. We should be trying to do that because it pushes us to come up with solutions. And when we try to come up with solutions, we come up with a bunch of interesting new stuff.
Right, not necessarily to the solution to the issue we're aiming for, but other solutions.
Well,
it's collateral, not damage, collateral benefit.
Yes, it's both, right? So like we come up with in those cases we did go to the moon, I do believe, and going to the moon. We did as we develop things. As we attempt these big things, it's shoot for the moon and you'll be among the stars, right? So you see other stuff, you achieve other stuff along the way. I think was it Reynolds Wrap and other things that were developed along as we developed technology to go to the moon, like tons of different stuff, a bunch of different stuff. So I think ambition gets us there. And I think applying ambitious people, smart people, people who are trying to do big things to technology that can make attempting those things easier will end up with things unimaginable. Maybe like a pendant that can talk to you and listen to the world around you.
We'll see. I mean, yeah, until these guys pony up with whatever it is they have planned. I mean, that sounds less extraordinary than, again, that the article
Yeah.
It sounds a little kind of almost ho-hum.
Yeah. So maybe the article doesn't know. You know what I mean? The author of that article doesn't know. You know, they're just taking a guess.
Unless that little device is powered by a form of AI that has not yet been, that is somehow exclusive to them.
Yeah.
That they've done the research and come up with something that is, you know, they've got some sort of corner on the market for some process. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. So you want to wrap this up?
Yeah.
Whoa, we went 43 minutes. Two hours 43 minutes. 2 hours 43 minutes.
Yeah. Yes, I am going to, on a completely different level, going from the sublime to the ridiculous. I'm about to record my video review of the deluxe box set version of Metallica's album Load, which comes with 245 bonus tracks.
That's insane. You should go track by track.
I would need AI to help me get through it.
You should do that. I mean, I swear you would be like the king of Metallica YouTube if you did track by track Load.
I mean, I'm glad it's a long weekend. I don't know how I'm going to digest that all, but yeah, I already have a lot to say about it, and I haven't even listened to this gigantic. I mean, like to do a track by track video, I would need to write scripts and have AI in my visage narrate them in my voice, and
you could do that.
And I should say that that's what it is in the video, so that people know. And
well, I mean, what you could do, you've written a ton. You could upload in a project like Saby, like a ton of Saby articles, and then have it like work with you in your voice answering the thing.
Yeah, but it can't know what I would think of that music.
Obviously not, right? But
so
it could
maybe that little box can that they're.
It could help you with your tone, I would think.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Man, but who would watch a track by track
Uh,
rather than listen to the actual thing? Because this is what
because
I'm.
I mean, there's a whole other version of this that I thought we may have gone down, but that we didn't, and I'm glad we didn't. Um, um, Basically, there was this guy who was on Ethan House's show that pissed me off. That sort of argued this the same point that you're arguing. That
Wait,
it was
Ethan
like
Strauss? Did you say?
on
No.
his show,
Okay. Oh, House
the
of
guy
Strauss.
who was with his show with him.
Yeah.
But maybe another time.
What did he argue? Just real quick. I'm just curious.
His argument was that the internet was derivative, and that basically creator economy is bullshit.
Oh wow, I'd love to hear your take on that at some point. On camera.
Yeah, so maybe we'll do it next time.
I'd love to have you tackle that and just be, I'm very curious. But yeah, I mean, here's a question, a meta question, using this box set as an example. Like, would more people listen to the commentary about it? Because it's going to take work for even the most diehard fucking Metallica fan.
Yeah,
cannot get through this box set like quick. Like you need like a week to it's like 13 CDs and 4 DVDs, and there's a lot of shit in there, a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But would more people listen to someone talking about it than actually ingest the thing itself? And I would think I can guess what your answer is.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. So
I think it's no different than like me and all the other Radiohead geeks going to greenplastic.com and like just debating Radiohead. Like, come on. It's and hearing, going and reading reviews of different, people about different concerts.
And then reviewing the reviews yeah.
Yeah. So I think like in this era, I mean, I think just the dedication it would take to go track by track and do that. I think it would. I think you would. The Metallica faithful would come out in droves.
Just even thinking about doing that just gave me a headache. Although it's very exciting. I'm excited, and I'll be honest. I'm not a fan of that record. I don't hate it either, but I'm excited. I'm like, well, fuck, power to them for putting. Because I mean, this is for fans that are really you have to really love that record to want that much stuff.
You gotta go hard. These are hardcores.
But I also admire them for doing it. Even like I think that record is too long to begin with, and it's like, damn, they're really throwing the kitchen fucking sink.
Yeah.
At something that isn't considered the high point of their career, but I'm also like, well, hey, let me take an open mind.
Yeah.
So maybe I will do what I mean, man, that is really specialized. That is.
But that's the internet, though.
I know. How can I explain that to like people? Like, yes, I'm doing a track by track on 245 songs. Say, holy shit, get a life.
Okay, here's one thing that I've been threatening to do, that I've been meaning to do, I should do, because I am obsessed with TV theme songs. And I wanted to do my top 50 TV theme songs and do a video for everyone.
Oh, that would do very well.
And just like I made the list, and I just didn't record them all.
I think that's a great but that just strikes me as a more noble endeavor.
Noble endeavor?
You can pass that off as like historical. To me, like, I'm not the type of fan to sit and talk about track by track. I mean, I might do that for certain records.
Yeah.
But I'm not that. I don't have that like autism spectrum type fandom where I like to be so microscopic about things. And it just, I think you're right. I think I should try something grand and different than just a review. I should try something really fucking totally extraordinary. You know what I mean? Like, I'll have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Or do a parody video written by AI or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
you
know.
could.
But
Okay.
actually, training AI on my tone to make fun of me so that my audience could laugh at that, I would be totally fine with that.
Okay.
Like just saying things in my voice that are just ridiculous but kind of sound like me. I'm cool with that. That would be kind of funny.
Cool.
So, all right,
All
man.
right.
Well, that was fun.
Yeah. On that note, later, y'all.